I've always been the one who makes everything work. The invisible hand arranging the flowers, setting the table, making sure everyone has what they need before they even know they need it. That's what mothers do, I told myself. We sacrifice, we give. We fade into the background so others can shine. For 30 years, I've been Grace, mother of 3 beautiful daughters, Leah, Jean, and Ivy, and nothing more. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person with dreams and desires. I became a function, a role, a pair of hands that could transform chaos into order. That Monday morning, the call from Leah didn't surprise me. Her voice was bright with excitement, but I already knew what was coming. "Mom, guess what? Ivy got that promotion she's been working toward. We're throwing her a celebration on Friday night." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for my youngest. I'd love to be there. A brief silence followed, and I felt my stomach tighten. I knew that silence too well. "Well, actually, Mom," Leah hesitated. "There will be a lot of important people there. Her colleagues, her boss, very professional crowd. But we really need your help setting up. No one sets a table like you do." I clutched the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "So I'm not invited to the actual party?" "It's not that. It's a very formal environment. But we need you there by 4 to help with everything." "Please?" Before I could respond, the call beeped, and suddenly Jean and Ivy were there too, talking over each other. "Mom, can you bring those gold-rimmed plates you have? And those crystal glasses? Oh, and could you make those little canapes everyone loves?" I nodded even though they couldn't see me. "Yes, of course," I heard myself say. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. The familiar ache in my chest had returned, the one that appeared when I realized, yet again, that I was needed but not wanted, useful but not welcome. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Instructions, requests, reminders. Each text message a small paper cut on my already wounded heart. "Don't forget the linen napkins. Make sure to iron the tablecloth first. Can you bring that big vase from the living room?" I collected everything they asked for, packing items carefully into boxes. I prepared the canapes, chilling them so they'd be perfect for Friday. I ironed the tablecloth until not a single wrinkle remained. All the while, a voice inside me grew louder, asking questions I'd never dared to consider. Is this all I am to them? A convenient service? Friday arrived. By noon, I was dressed in my helper clothes, comfortable pants and a simple blouse that wouldn't draw attention. I was gathering the last few items when I turned on the television for background noise. That's when I saw her, a woman about my age with elegant silver streaks in her hair, walking alone on a golden beach. She looked peaceful, powerful, alive. The narrator's voice floated through my living room. "It's never too late to choose yourself. Take the step you've always postponed." It was just a travel commercial for Lisbon, a place I'd dreamed of visiting since I was young. But something about that woman's smile, the way she walked as if she belonged to herself, broke something open inside me. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop. Before I could think too hard, I found myself looking at flights. There was one leaving that very evening. One way. "This is insane," I whispered to myself. "I can't just leave." But why couldn't I? My daughters were grown women. They had their own lives, their own homes. They didn't need me. They just needed what I could do for them. I clicked purchase before I could talk myself out of it. When the confirmation appeared on my screen, a strange feeling washed over me. Not guilt, not anxiety, but something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I packed a small suitcase with shaking hands. Passport, some clothes, my medications. I left the boxes of party supplies neatly stacked by the door. Then I wrote a note and placed it on top. "I've chosen myself this time." As my taxi pulled away from the house, my phone began to buzz. Leah, then Jean, then Ivy. Text messages flooding in. "Mom, where are you? It's almost 4. The guests will be here in 2 hours." "Mom? Mom?" I turned off my phone and looked out the window as my neighborhood disappeared behind me. For the first time in decades, I took a deep breath that filled my lungs completely. I was terrified. I was exhilarated. I was finally choosing myself. At the airport, waiting to board, I suddenly wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. What would happen to the party? What would my daughters think? What kind of mother abandons her children when they need her? But then I remembered. They hadn't invited their mother to the celebration. They had summoned their housekeeper. As the plane took off, carrying me away from everything familiar, I clutched the armrests and closed my eyes. Behind me, I knew chaos was unfolding. The tablecloth would remain unironed, the canapes unmade, the flowers unarranged. For once, I wouldn't be there to fix everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what we all needed. I had no idea then how this decision would change all our lives. I only knew that as the plane rose higher, something inside me was awakening after a very long sleep, and despite my fear, I couldn't wait to discover what came next. I slept on a plane for the first time in my life that night. No tossing and turning, no mental checklist of things to do. Just deep, dreamless sleep as we crossed the Atlantic. When I woke, the captain was announcing our descent into Lisbon. Morning light glimmered on the Tagus River below, and my heart fluttered with a strange mixture of terror and delight. What had I done? In the taxi from the airport, I checked my phone. 57 missed calls, 83 text messages, most from my daughters, growing increasingly frantic. "Mom, where are you? Where's the vase? The party is today." Guests began to arrive. The table was crooked, the cutlery didn't match, the tablecloth was stained, and the candles. No one knew where they were. Without me, nothing worked. Tension rose. Ivy's boss arrived to a dark living room and a buffet still in its packaging. The sisters argued, accusing each other of being disorganized while trying to salvage the event with disastrous improvisations. A guest slipped on a poorly laid rug, and a glass of wine spilled on another's dress. Ivy cried in the bathroom. Jean yelled for help, and Leah, panicked, kept trying to call me. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For once, they were acknowledging that without me, things fell apart. Without me, they couldn't manage. But the most surprising feeling was how little I cared about the chaos I'd left behind. The taxi driver, a woman with kind eyes and silvering hair, smiled at me in the rearview mirror. "First time in Lisboa?" she asked in accented English. "Yes," I answered, putting my phone away. "My first time anywhere in many years." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "Then welcome to your new beginning." I hadn't booked a hotel, another first. I'd always been the planner, the one with backup plans for the backup plans. But here I was, in a foreign country with no itinerary. The driver recommended a small pension in Alfama, the old quarter of the city. "It is simple, but clean, with a view of the river," she promised. The room was indeed simple. A narrow bed, a tiny desk, a window that opened to reveal red-tiled rooftops cascading down to the shimmering blue water. I stood at that window for a long time, breathing in the unfamiliar scents of salt air and grilling sardines. Below, narrow cobblestone streets wound between ancient buildings painted in faded yellows and pinks. I realized I was smiling. Not the controlled smile I wore for others, but something real and wide and unstrained. Hours passed before guilt finally caught up with me. I should call them, I thought. Let them know I'm safe. But when I picked up my phone, I paused. What would I say? That I was sorry? I wasn't. That I'd come home soon? I didn't know when I would. Instead, I sent a single text to all three. "I am safe. I need time for myself. Please respect that." Then I turned off my phone again, tucked it into the desk drawer, and walked out into the Lisbon afternoon. For the next 2 weeks, I lived completely for myself. I ate pastel de nata in quiet cafes, savoring the flaky pastry and creamy filling without having to share or clean up after anyone. I discovered that I loved strong Portuguese coffee and could drink it at any hour without losing sleep. I wandered through the Alfama district, getting pleasantly lost among the winding streets and stepping into tiny shops where I touched handmade ceramics and soft wool scarves. Each night, I returned to my small room, exhausted in the best possible way. Each morning, I woke to the sound of seagulls and distant church bells. And each day, I discovered something new about myself. I liked modern art more than classical. I preferred red wine to white. I enjoyed sitting alone in cafes, watching people. I didn't mind eating alone in restaurants. One rainy afternoon, browsing in a bookstore, I found myself in the photography section. A large book of black and white portraits caught my eye. As I flipped through it, something stirred inside me. A memory so old it felt like it belonged to someone else. I had wanted to be a photographer once. Before marriage, before children, I'd saved for a camera and taken classes at the community college. I'd had an eye for composition, my instructor had said. But then life happened, and that camera gathered dust until I eventually sold it to pay for Leah's dance classes. The next day, I bought a simple digital camera. Not an expensive one, a budget model for tourists. But it felt good in my hands, solid and full of possibilities. I spent the following week photographing Lisbon, laundry hanging between buildings, an old man playing chess in the park, the intricate pattern of tiles on a church wall. Each shot brought back that old joy, that sense of seeing the world through a frame that made even ordinary things beautiful. At the end of that third week, I finally checked my phone again. The tone of the messages had changed. "Mom, we're worried sick. Please just let us know you're okay. We're sorry, Mom. Please, come home." The last one, from Ivy, caught me off guard. "I didn't get to thank you for everything you've done for me. I took you for granted. We all did." I sat on my bed, staring at the message. Part of me softened, wanting to rush home and make everything right again. But another part, the new part, the part that was learning to stand firm, knew it wasn't time yet. I wrote back, "I'm still finding myself. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Love you all." Then I booked a train ticket to Porto. The pension owner smiled when I told her. "Ah, Porto is magical," she said. "You will find more of yourself there." The train journey north took me through rolling green countryside. I watched it pass, camera in hand, occasionally snapping photos of sunlight breaking through clouds onto verdant hills. When had I last really looked at the world without mentally noting all the things I needed to fix or arrange? I couldn't remember. In Porto, I found a room in a guest house overlooking the Douro River and the famous bridges. On my first evening, I took a boat tour, watching the city lights come on as dusk fell. A couple near me, about my age, smiled and offered to take my photo. "Are you traveling alone?" the woman asked, her English carrying a German accent. "Yes," I said, realizing it no longer felt strange to say it. "Just me." "How brave," she said, and her husband nodded in agreement. Brave. No one had ever called me that before. Reliable, yes. Responsible, certainly. But brave? That was new. That night, I sat at a small restaurant eating grilled fish and drinking vinho verde. The waiter, an older man with a weathered face, stopped by my table. "You enjoy your dinner, señora?" "It's wonderful," I replied. He studied my face for a moment. "You are American? On holiday?" "Yes," I said, then added something I'd never said aloud before. "I'm on a journey to find myself." Instead of looking confused or dismissive, he nodded seriously. "The best journey of all," he said, topping up my wine glass. "Saúde, to finding yourself." As I raised my glass in response, my phone buzzed with a notification. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was an email from Leah, with a subject line that made my breath catch. "Dad is trying to take control of everything." I opened it, my hand suddenly unsteady. The message was brief, but sent ice through my veins. "Mom, please call us. Dad's saying you've abandoned the family and he's filing for divorce. He wants the house and everything in it. He says you're mentally unstable. We need you, please." The wine turned bitter in my mouth. My ex-husband, Richard, had been out of our lives for years. He'd left when Ivy was just 12, disappearing to start a new family with his much younger secretary. The classic story. He'd barely kept in touch, sending occasional birthday cards and child support payments that gradually dwindled to nothing. And now he was back? Using my absence to position himself as the wronged party? I felt the ground shift beneath me. The freedom I'd been savoring suddenly felt precarious. The journey I'd begun, was it selfish after all? Had I abandoned my children when they needed me? The waiter noticed my changed expression. Bad news? He asked gently. Yes, I whispered. I might have to go home. He refilled my water glass. Sometimes we must go back to move forward, he said. But never forget what you have learned on your journey. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small room, torn between the life I was discovering and the responsibilities pulling me back. Should I book a flight home immediately? Or was this just another way they were trying to control me, to force my return on their terms? By dawn, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't rush back in panic. I wouldn't let fear erase everything I'd learned about standing on my own. But I wouldn't abandon my daughters to face Richard alone either. I booked a flight for the following week. 7 more days to strengthen the woman I was becoming before facing the woman I had been. What I didn't know then was that Richard wasn't just after the house. He was after something much more valuable, something that would test every ounce of newfound strength I'd gained on these Portuguese shores. Those final days in Portugal were bittersweet. I wandered the steep streets of Porto, taking photographs and trying to absorb every sensation. The weight of the camera in my hands, the warmth of the sun on my face, the taste of coffee in small cafes where the baristas now greeted me by name. I was savoring these moments while steeling myself for what lay ahead. I called Leah the day before my flight. Mom? Oh my God, is it really you? Her voice cracked with relief. It's me, I said, sitting on a bench overlooking the Douro River. I'm coming home tomorrow. Thank goodness. Everything's a mess, Mom. Dad's been… I know, I interrupted gently. But before we talk about that, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to be who I was before. I've changed. Silence on the line. Then, hesitantly, what do you mean? I mean, I'm still your mother, and I love you girls more than anything. But I'm also a person with my own life, my own dreams. I'm coming back on my terms. Another pause. I could almost hear her trying to process this. Okay, she finally said. I think I understand. But Mom, you should know. Dad's saying horrible things about you. He's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown. Of course he was. Richard had always been masterful at controlling narratives. When he left us, he'd somehow convinced his family, and even some of our friends, that I had pushed him away with my obsessive focus on the girls, as if being a devoted mother was a character flaw. Let him talk, I said, surprised by my own calmness. Those who know me will see the truth. After we hung up, I went back to my room and opened my suitcase. Among the clothes and souvenirs was a small envelope of photographs I'd had developed. Images of Lisbon and Porto, of course, but also pictures of myself that I'd asked strangers to take. Grace standing by the water, Grace smiling in a cafe, Grace looking directly at the camera, eyes clear and unafraid. I barely recognized this woman, and yet she felt more authentically me than any version I'd been in years. The flight home was long and gave me too much time to worry. By the time we landed, my newfound confidence was wavering. What if Richard had already turned the girls against me? What if coming back was a mistake? I took a deep breath as I collected my suitcase from the carousel. No, this wasn't about Richard. This was about me finally standing up for myself. And for my daughters, who deserved to see what a strong woman looked like. Leah was waiting at arrivals, looking both relieved and uncertain. Her hug was tight, desperate almost. You look different, she said as she pulled back to study me. I touched my hair, now cut shorter and showing its natural gray instead of the dyed brown I'd maintained for years. I am different. In the car, Leah filled me in. Richard had appeared at Ivy's apartment the day after the disastrous party, offering comfort and support. He'd quickly positioned himself as the steady parent, the one who would never disappear without warning. And soon enough, he'd started talking about financial matters. He says since you abandoned the family home, he has rights to it. He even had a lawyer call us, Mom. I felt a flicker of anger. Our divorce settlement had been clear. The house was mine. I'd been the one to buy it originally, using money my parents had left me. Richard had never paid a cent toward it. He has no claim, I said firmly. The house is mine. It's in writing. Leah gripped the steering wheel tightly. That's what I told him. But he says you're unstable now and can't be trusted with assets. I almost laughed. And he's the picture of stability? The man who left his family for his 25-year-old secretary? Well, now he's saying that was your fault too. That you drove him away by being controlling. The familiar sting of his gaslighting hit me, but it didn't cut as deep as it once would have. Portugal had given me perspective and distance. Where are we going? I asked, noticing we weren't heading toward my house. To Jean's place. We're all staying there for now. Dad's, well, he's at your house. I sat up straight. He's what? Leah winced. He said he was checking on things while you were gone. He has an old key from when Ivy lived at home. Once he was in, he just stayed. The anger that swept through me wasn't the helpless, simmering kind I'd lived with for years. This was clear and sharp and energizing. Richard had always taken what he wanted. My youth, my confidence, and now he thought he could take my home? Not anymore. Take me to the house, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Now. Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. He's been drinking a lot and he has that lawyer friend staying with him. I don't care if he has the entire Supreme Court with him. It's my house and I'm going home. The determination in my voice must have convinced her. Leah changed course, though her worried glances in my direction continued. As we pulled up to the modest 2-story house I'd called home for 30 years, I saw lights blazing through every window. Richard's car sat in the driveway alongside another expensive-looking sedan. Music thumped from inside. Loud, aggressive rock that had always been his preference. Never mine. I stepped out of the car, straightening my shoulders. The woman who had left this house a month ago would have hesitated, would have wondered how to manage the situation without causing conflict. But that woman was gone. Mom, wait, Leah called, hurrying after me. Let me go in first. No, honey. This is something I need to do. I walked up the familiar pathway, climbed the 3 steps to the porch, and instead of using my key, I rang the doorbell. My doorbell. After a moment, the door swung open. Richard stood there, drink in hand, looking exactly as I remembered. Tall, still handsome in that weathered way, with the practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. The smile faltered when he saw me. Grace. He recovered quickly, leaning against the doorframe casually. So the wanderer returns. I'd like you to leave my house, Richard. Simple, direct, no room for negotiation. He chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. Your house? I'm not sure you're in a position to make demands, Grace. Not after abandoning your family. Our daughters were distraught. I was acutely aware of Leah behind me, watching this exchange. For her sake, and for her sisters, I needed to remain calm. Our daughters are grown women, Richard. And yes, this is my house, as clearly stated in our divorce settlement. Now please, get your things and go. A man appeared behind Richard, slightly younger, wearing an expensive suit despite the late hour. Is there a problem? He asked, eyeing me with calculation. Mark, this is Grace, my ex-wife, Richard said smoothly. Grace, this is Mark Donovan, my attorney. He's been helping me assess my rights regarding the marital assets that were unfairly distributed during our divorce. I almost laughed. There was nothing unfair about it, Richard. You got exactly what you wanted, your freedom. Now, I'll say it one more time. Get out of my house. Or what? Richard's voice hardened, the charm evaporating. You'll call the police? And tell them what? That you disappeared for a month, leaving your property abandoned, and now you're upset that your ex-husband stepped in to look after it? I felt Leah tense beside me. She'd always hated confrontation, a direct result of growing up with Richard's volatile temper. Mom, maybe we should go to Jean's tonight and sort this out tomorrow, she whispered. I looked at my daughter's anxious face, then back at Richard's smug one. He thought he'd won already. He expected me to retreat, to take the path of least resistance as I always had. Not this time. I stepped forward, forcing him to back up slightly. Richard, I've spent the last month discovering who I am without you, without the fear and doubt you planted in me. And do you know what I found? I'm stronger than I ever knew. So no, I won't be going to Jean's. I won't be calling the police either. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Instead, I'm going to call Jason Reynolds. Richard's face paled slightly. Jason had been our divorce attorney, and more importantly, he had evidence of Richard's financial misconduct that we'd agreed not to use as long as Richard stuck to the settlement terms. "You're bluffing," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Try me." I held his gaze steadily. "I've changed, Richard. I'm not afraid of you anymore." The moment stretched between us, taut with decades of unspoken resentments and power struggles. Then, surprisingly, it was Mark who broke the tension. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the morning," he said, placing a hand on Richard's shoulder. "When everyone's had some rest." "Fine," Richard spat. "But this isn't over, Grace." As they gathered their things, I stood in the entryway of my home, watching. Richard moved with angry, jerking motions, slamming drawers and doors. I noticed empty liquor bottles on the coffee table, ashtrays full of cigarette butts, though Richard had supposedly quit smoking years ago. When they finally left, brushing past me without another word, I walked through my house, taking inventory of the damage. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, clothes strewn across furniture. The framed family photos that had once lined the mantel were gone, replaced by beer cans and overflowing ashtrays. Leah followed me, her face tight with anger. "I'm so sorry, Mom. We should have stopped him somehow." I turned to her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time in years. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and tension in every line of her body. This past month had been hard on her, too. "It's not your fault," I said gently. "None of this is. This is between your father and me." I touched her cheek, noting with surprise that my hand was steady. "Can you call your sisters? Tell them I'm home and I'd like to see them tomorrow. We all need to talk." After Leah left, promising to return in the morning with Jean and Ivy, I stood alone in my living room. The house felt different now, tainted by Richard's presence but also strangely liberating. Before my trip, this house had been both my sanctuary and my prison. Now it could be something else entirely, a place for new beginnings. I went upstairs to my bedroom, half expecting to find Richard had claimed that too. But the room was untouched, almost as if he'd been afraid to enter this one private space. As I unpacked my small suitcase, placing my camera carefully on the nightstand, I thought about what tomorrow would bring. My daughters would come, and we would talk, really talk, perhaps for the first time. And Richard wouldn't go down without a fight. What I didn't know yet was that he had one more card to play, one that would test not just my newfound strength, but the bonds with my daughters as well. Because even as I prepared for bed that night, Richard was meeting with someone who knew exactly how to hurt me the most. I woke early the next morning, the jet lag still pulling at my edges. For a moment, I forgot where I was, expecting to see the small window of my Lisbon room. Instead, I was surrounded by familiar walls, in the bed I'd slept in for decades. Home, but different. Or maybe I was the one who was different. I made coffee and carried it out to the back porch. The small garden I'd tended for years had become overgrown in my absence. Weeds choked the flower beds, and the rose bushes stretched wild and untrimmed. But there was beauty in that wildness, I realized. It wasn't perfect anymore, but it was alive. Like me. The doorbell rang just after 9. I opened it to find all 3 of my daughters standing there, looking uncertain. Leah, the peacemaker. Jean, the practical one. And Ivy, my youngest, always torn between independence and seeking approval. "Come in," I said, holding the door wide. I made coffee. They filed in silently, eyes darting around the messy living room. I'd made no attempt to clean up Richard's chaos yet. That would come later. "I can't believe Dad did this," Jean said, kicking an empty beer can with her foot. "It's disgusting." "We'll sort it out," I assured her. "But first, we need to talk." We gathered in the kitchen, the one room Richard had left relatively untouched. As we sat around the old wooden table, scene of countless family meals, homework sessions, and late-night conversations, I looked at my daughters' faces. Really looked. They were scared. Not just about Richard and his schemes, but about me. about this new version of their mother who had disappeared without warning and returned with gray hair and a determined expression. "I want to apologize," I began, surprising them. Not for leaving. That was something I needed to do. But for not explaining better. "I should have called sooner, let you know I was safe." "Why did you go?" Ivy asked softly. It was the first time she'd spoken directly to me since my return. I took a deep breath. "Because for the first time I saw myself through your eyes. Not as your mother, not as a person with her own dreams and needs, but as a convenience. Someone to set up parties and then disappear when the important people arrive." The flash of guilt on their faces told me my words had hit home. "The day of your promotion party, I realized I'd spent my entire adult life being useful to everyone but myself, and I needed to know who I was beyond that role. So you just left?" The hurt in Ivy's voice was palpable. "Yes," I said simply. "I chose myself. Maybe for the first time ever." Silence fell over the kitchen. I waited, letting them process. Finally, Jean spoke. "We were awful to you, weren't we? About that party. And not just the party," Leah added quietly. "We've been taking you for granted for years." I reached across the table and took their hands. "I'm not looking for apologies or trying to make you feel guilty. I just want us to build something healthier going forward. I want to be your mother, but I also need to be Grace. Does that make sense?" They nodded, though I could see they were still struggling to understand fully. It would take time, for all of us. "Now," I said, straightening up, "tell me exactly what your father has been saying." The story they shared was classic Richard. He'd appeared at Ivy's apartment the night of the failed party, all concern and fatherly support. He'd helped them try to contact me, making a show of his worry. And when days passed with no word, he'd begun planting seeds. "He said you'd been acting strangely for months," Jean explained. "Talking about wanting to escape, complaining about feeling trapped. Then he started suggesting you might have had some kind of breakdown," Leah continued. "He even mentioned early onset dementia, said his aunt had it and did erratic things before she was diagnosed." I felt a cold anger building inside me. Richard hadn't changed at all. Still manipulating, still twisting facts to serve his narrative. And when did he decide to move himself into my house? The girls exchanged glances. "About 2 weeks after you left," Ivy said. "He said he was worried about the property being empty, that there might be break-ins. Said he was just looking out for your interests. And the part about claiming the house is his?" Another uncomfortable silence. "That started last week," Leah finally said. "After he met with that lawyer friend. Suddenly he was talking about how you'd forfeited your right to the property by abandoning it. How the divorce settlement could be challenged because you were mentally incompetent when you signed it." I laughed, surprising them. "Well, he's certainly getting creative in his old age." My calm reaction seemed to reassure them. The tension in the room eased slightly. "What are you going to do, Mom?" Jean asked. "First, I'm calling Jason Reynolds. Then I'm changing the locks. And then we're going to have a family dinner, just the 4 of us. And I'm going to show you my pictures from Portugal." True to my word, I spent the morning on the phone with Jason, who was as sharp and supportive as ever. Yes, Richard's claims were baseless. No, I had nothing to worry about legally. Yes, he would send a strongly worded letter immediately. By afternoon, a locksmith had changed every lock in the house. I'd cleaned up the worst of Richard's mess and opened all the windows, letting fresh air sweep through the rooms. The girls had gone home to get some rest, promising to return for dinner. I was in the garden, cutting back the most aggressive weeds, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Grace? It's Linda. Linda Peterson." I froze. Linda had been my closest friend for years, until Richard left me for his secretary. Linda had gradually withdrawn, making excuses to cancel our coffee dates, stopping her calls. Eventually, I'd heard through mutual friends that she was regularly having dinner with Richard and his new wife. The betrayal had cut deep. "What do you want, Linda?" My voice was cooler than the spring breeze. I think we need to talk. About Richard." Something in her tone made me pay attention. "I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can I come over?" Every instinct told me to refuse. Linda had abandoned our friendship when I needed her most. But curiosity won out. "Fine, I'm home now." 30 minutes later, Linda sat across from me at my kitchen table. She looked older, more careworn than I remembered. Her perfectly highlighted hair and designer clothes couldn't hide the unhappy lines around her mouth. "You look good, Grace," she said, studying me. "Different. I am different. Now, what about Richard?" Linda twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered well. "He came to see Mike and me last night. He was agitated, talking about you, about the house, about how he deserved more from the divorce." I waited, sensing there was more. "He wants Mike to testify that you were unstable even before the divorce, that you had episodes of irrational behavior." She couldn't meet my eyes. "He reminded Mike about that business loan he helped secure for him years ago. Mike was Linda's husband and a well-respected doctor in town. His word would carry weight. And will Mike do that? Lie for Richard?" Linda finally looked up, her eyes hollow. "He's considering it. Richard, he knows things, Grace. Things that could hurt Mike's practice if they came out." The pieces clicked into place. Richard's hold over our old social circle. The way former friends had distanced themselves from me after the divorce. He'd been collecting leverage all along. "What things, Linda?" She shook her head. "I can't say. But it's bad. And I just wanted to warn you. Richard is serious about taking the house. He's got nothing left, Grace. His second wife took him for everything in their divorce last year, and his business is failing. He's desperate." The news about Richard's second divorce didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was the hint of sympathy I felt. Not enough to change my resolve, but enough to recognize the sad, small man he'd become. "Thank you for telling me, Linda. But why now? Why help me after all this time?" She smiled sadly. "Because when I heard you'd gone to Portugal by yourself, just packed up and left, I admired you, Grace. I've never had that kind of courage." After she left, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking. Richard was spinning a web around me, trying to tighten it until I had no room to move. In the past, I might have given in, agreed to some compromise just to keep the peace. Not anymore. When my daughters arrived for dinner, I shared what Linda had told me. Their reactions ranged from outrage, Jian, to anxious worry, Leah, to quiet determination, Ivy. "He can't get away with this," Ivy said firmly. "We won't let him." "It's not your battle to fight," I told her gently. "Yes, it is," she insisted. "We're a family, and I think it's time we start acting like one, supporting each other instead of taking each other for granted." Over a simple dinner of pasta and salad, I showed them my photographs from Portugal, the ancient streets of Lisbon, the boats on the Douro River, the intricate tiles and towering cathedrals. "These are really good, Mom," Jean said, genuine admiration in her voice. "I had no idea you were interested in photography." "Neither did I, really," I admitted. "Or maybe I forgot. There are a lot of things I'm rediscovering about myself." As we lingered over dessert, Leah asked the question that had clearly been on all their minds. "So, are you going to stay? Or will you go back to Portugal?" "I'm staying," I said firmly. "This is my home, and I won't be driven from it. But I will be living differently. I'm looking into photography classes at the community college, and I'm thinking of turning the spare room into a dark room." "What about Dad?" Ivy asked quietly. "What if he doesn't back down?" I met her worried gaze with a steady one of my own. "Then we'll deal with it, together." Later, after they'd gone home, I sat on my porch in the gathering darkness. The house behind me was quiet, emptier than it had been in years, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a blank canvas, waiting for a new picture to be created. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number again. You've made a mistake coming back, Grace. Some things are better left in the past. Ask your daughters about the real reason they wanted you out of Ivy's party." My heart stuttered as I stared at the message. Richard, obviously. But what did he mean? What about Ivy's party? Before I could process it, another text arrived. This one included a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably showing Ivy in an intense conversation with a man who looked remarkably like Richard. The photo was dated 2 weeks before I left for Portugal. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me once again. Had my daughters been in contact with Richard even before I left? Had the whole party scenario been some kind of setup? I wanted to call them immediately, demand explanations. But the Grace who had wandered the hills of Lisbon had learned something about patience, about observing before reacting. So instead, I simply texted back, "Nice try, Richard, but whatever game you're playing, you'll lose." Then I blocked the number and went inside, locking my new doors securely behind me. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight, I chose peace. What I didn't realize was that Richard's text had planted a seed of doubt, one that would grow until I was forced to confront the possibility that my journey to self-discovery had only revealed the first layer of a much deeper deception. I barely slept that night. Richard's message and that photo kept replaying in my mind. Why would Ivy be meeting with her father in secret? What weren't my daughters telling me? By morning, I'd decided on a direct approach. No more games, no more half-truths. We'd all had enough of those to last a lifetime. I called Ivy and asked her to meet me for coffee. Alone. The small cafe downtown had been one of my regular spots before Portugal. The barista recognized me, did a double take at my new look, then grinned. "The usual, Mrs. Mitchell?" "Yes, please, Tim. And whatever my daughter wants when she arrives." I chose a quiet table by the window and waited, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk. Each face told a story: the harried mother with 2 small children, the businessman checking his watch, the elderly couple walking arm in arm. Before my trip, I wouldn't have noticed any of them. Now, I saw stories everywhere, potential photographs waiting to be captured. Ivy arrived looking nervous, her usual confidence subdued. She'd always been my most ambitious daughter, the one most like Richard in her drive and determination. But today, she seemed smaller somehow. "Mom," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Is everything okay? Your message sounded serious." I took a sip of coffee, gathering my thoughts. "I received a strange text last night, from your father." Her face paled slightly. Not surprise. Fear. "He sent a photo of you and him together, from before I left for Portugal." Ivy's eyes dropped to her coffee cup. Her fingers gripped it tightly, knuckles whitening. "Is there something you want to tell me, Ivy?" For a long moment she was silent. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Any of what, sweetheart? Just tell me." The story spilled out of her then, halting at first, then in a rush. Yes, she'd been meeting with Richard secretly. Not just once, but several times over the past year. It had started innocently enough. He'd reached out after her company had featured her in their newsletter, congratulating her on her success. He'd seemed genuinely proud, interested in her life in a way he hadn't been since she was a child. "I was so surprised," she said, wiping her eyes. "He actually wanted to know about my work, my ambitions. He never cared about that stuff before." Over time, the meetings had become regular, coffee every few weeks. Richard asking about her career, offering advice, connections, playing the devoted father he'd never been. "And the promotion party? Where does that fit in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the hurt building inside me. Ivy looked down again. "Dad suggested it. He said I should celebrate my accomplishment, that I deserved recognition. And excluding me? Was that his idea too?" She nodded miserably. "He said you wouldn't be comfortable with his business associates, that it would be awkward for everyone." I knew it was wrong, Mom, but he was so insistent, and he'd promised to bring people who could help my career and— "So Richard was at the party?" I interrupted, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. "The party I wasn't invited to but was expected to prepare?" "Yes," she whispered. "He was supposed to be. That was the plan." "What happened?" Ivy's laugh was bitter. "He never showed up. None of his important connections did. The party was a disaster even before we realized you were gone. I waited and waited, but he just ghosted me. When we couldn't reach you, I tried calling him too. That's when he suddenly appeared at my apartment, all concern and support. I absorbed this, a cold clarity washing over me. He used you, Ivy, to hurt me." She nodded, fresh tears spilling. "I see that now. He never cared about my promotion. It was all part of some twisted game to get back at you." And I fell for it because I was so desperate for his approval. I reached across the table and took her hand. Oh, honey, you're not the first person Richard has manipulated, and you won't be the last. He's an expert at finding people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. Do Leah and Jean know about the photo he sent you? No, not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Relief crossed her face. They would be so angry with me. They warned me not to trust him, but I didn't listen. Did they know he was supposed to be at the party? Yes. They weren't happy about it, but they went along with it for my sake. Ivy looked at me, anguish in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant to hurt you. I squeezed her hand. I know, but Ivy, you need to understand something. Your worth doesn't come from your father's approval, or mine for that matter. It comes from within you. She gave me a watery smile. That sounds like something the new Grace would say. Maybe the new Grace is just saying things the old Grace was too afraid to voice. As we left the cafe, Ivy hugged me tightly. What are you going to do about Dad? About the house? I'm going to fight, of course. I stepped back to look at her. The question is, what are you going to do? Her expression hardened with resolve. I'm going to stand with you. And I'm going to tell Leah and Jean everything. We'll tell them together, I said. No more secrets in this family. The meeting with all three daughters that evening was difficult, but necessary. Ivy confessed everything, her voice steady despite her obvious shame. Leah and Jean were hurt at first, not just by Ivy's actions, but by the revelation that Richard had been manipulating all of them in different ways. He told me you were thinking of selling the house, Jean admitted. Said you'd talked about it before you left. And he told me you'd been having memory problems, Leah added. That you'd been forgetting important things and acting erratically. The extent of Richard's duplicity was breathtaking. He'd been laying groundwork for months, it seemed, preparing to take advantage of any opportunity. But why? Ivy asked. What does he gain from all this? The house, I said simply. He's after the house. Jean frowned. But why? It's not exactly a mansion. I'd been pondering this myself. The house, while comfortable, wasn't valuable enough to justify such elaborate schemes. Unless? The land, I said suddenly. Your father always said this property would be worth a fortune someday if the town expanded in this direction. And they just announced that new development project on the south side, Leah said, eyes widening. The one that's going to bring all those tech companies to town, which would make this land incredibly valuable, I finished. Especially to a man who's lost everything and is desperate to rebuild. We looked at each other, the full picture emerging at last. Richard hadn't been after revenge, or even trying to hurt me specifically. He'd been after money all along. So, what do we do now? Ivy asked. I smiled, feeling strangely calm despite everything we'd learned. Now we end this, once and for all. The plan came together quickly. Jason, my divorce attorney, was invaluable, helping us gather evidence of Richard's machinations. Linda contributed too, providing copies of text messages Richard had sent Mike about the testimony he needed. And my daughters, united for perhaps the first time in years, each played their part. 1 week later, Richard arrived at the house, lawyer in tow, for what he thought was a negotiation meeting. Instead, he found not just me and Jason, but all three of our daughters, Linda and Mike, and 2 police officers. The look on his face as he realized what was happening, that his entire scheme was exposed, was something I'll never forget. Not triumph, as I might once have imagined, but a profound sadness for the man he'd become. You have 2 options, Richard, Jason explained calmly. You can walk away now. No further contact, no more schemes, no more manipulation of your daughters. Or we can proceed with charges of harassment, attempted fraud, and trespassing. You can't prove anything, Richard blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can, Ivy said, stepping forward. She held up her phone. I've been recording our conversations for months, initially because I wanted to remember your advice, later because I started to suspect your motives. Richard's face crumpled, the last of his bravado evaporating. For a moment, he looked old and beaten. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of pity. It's over, Richard, I said gently. Let it be over. He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in decades. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Yes, I have." He left without another word, his lawyer trailing behind. Both men diminished somehow. We watched from the porch as their car disappeared down the street. "Do you think he'll be back?" Leah asked. "No," I said with certainty. "He knows when he's beaten." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my garden. The summer evening was warm, crickets chirping in the tall grass I hadn't yet trimmed. Above me, stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. I thought about the woman I'd been before Portugal, always accommodating, always putting others first, afraid to claim space in my own life. And I thought about the woman I was becoming, stronger, clearer, unafraid to stand my ground. The journey wasn't over, of course. There would be times when I'd slip back into old patterns, moments when the voice in my head would tell me to make myself smaller to keep the peace. But now I knew another way was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Ivy. "Dinner at my place next Sunday. You're invited. Actually, you're the guest of honor. No setup duties allowed." I smiled, typing back, "I'd be delighted to attend. As a guest." A few minutes later, another text arrived. This one from Jason. "House deed secure. Filed restraining order today. He won't bother you again." Relief washed through me. It was really over. The house was mine, unquestionably. And more importantly, so was my life. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and carried my camera out into the garden. The rising sun cast a golden glow over everything. The overgrown rose bushes, the tangled vines, the winding stone path I'd laid years ago. I took picture after picture, capturing this transitional moment. Not perfectly tended as it once was, not yet transformed into whatever it would become. Just beautifully, authentically itself in this moment. Later, I called the community college and registered for a photography class starting the following week. Then I called a contractor about converting the spare bedroom into a dark room. Small steps into my new life. As summer turned to fall, I established new patterns. Sunday dinners rotated between my house and my daughter's homes, but I was always a guest, never the behind-the-scenes worker. I took my camera everywhere, developing an eye for the beauty in ordinary moments. I made new friends in my photography class and reconnected with old ones who had nothing to do with Richard. And I planned my next trip. Not an escape this time, but an adventure. The Greek islands in spring, with my camera and a journal and an open heart. One evening in late October, Ivy stopped by unexpectedly. She looked nervous again, reminding me of that day in the cafe. "Mom, there's something I need to ask you," she said as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Anything, honey. Would you consider taking family portraits for us? Professional ones, I mean. We'd pay you, of course." I stared at her, surprised. "You want me to take your photos? Professionally?" She nodded eagerly. "Your work is amazing, Mom. Those shots you took of Leah's kids at the park last month, they captured something special, something real. That's what we want." I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the evening sun. "I'd be honored, but no payment necessary. This one's on me." Ivy smiled, relieved. "There's one more thing. I'm being considered for a position in the Lisbon office. It would be a big promotion, a chance to build something new." "Portugal?" I couldn't hide my delight. "Ivy, that's wonderful." "I'm a little scared," she admitted. "It's so far away, and I don't know anyone there, and my Portuguese is basically non-existent." I took her hand. "I happen to know the most wonderful little pension in Alfama with a view of the Tagus River, and I'd be happy to visit. Often." She laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." As we sat there, mother and daughter, watching the sky shift from orange to deep blue, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. My life hadn't turned out as I'd expected. My marriage had failed. I'd made mistakes as a mother. I'd lost myself for a time. But in choosing myself that day, in boarding a plane to Portugal instead of setting a table for a party I wasn't welcome to attend, I had found my way back to something authentic. Not perfect, not without complications or challenges, but real. And in that realness, I had discovered something powerful. When I honored my own worth, others began to see it too. The stars appeared overhead, one by one, each a small light in the vast darkness. I thought about all the women like me, those who had lost themselves in service to others, who had made themselves small to keep the peace, who had forgotten their own dreams while supporting everyone else's. I wished I could tell them all what I had learned, that it's never too late to choose yourself, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others is to show them your full, authentic self, that we all deserve to be more than just supporting characters in our own lives. As Ivy and I sat in comfortable silence, I picked up my camera and captured one more shot of the day, our two hands resting together on the porch railing, the last light of sunset illuminating them against the gathering darkness. Mother and daughter, different but connected, both choosing our own paths forward, both finally, fully seen.